Prince Harry took the witness stand on Wednesday in what was supposed to be a grueling multi-day cross-examination by Associated Newspapers Limited's legal team, only for the questioning to wrap up in a mere 2 hours. A stunning indication of just how poorly ANL's strategy is playing out. The tabloid's barrister, Anthony White KC, attempted to establish that Harry was chummy with male reporters like Rebecca English and Katie Nicholl, suggesting their sources were legitimate friendships rather than unlawful information gathering. Harry shut that nonsense down immediately, making it crystal clear that he merely tolerated the royal rota as part of his institutional duties, and that none of these journalists were ever his friends. A reality check that must have stung these delusional hacks who've been dining out on imaginary relationships for years. When White tried to use an email Harry sent after a wedding planner's burglary, in which Harry said he could guarantee it was linked to the Sun or Daily Mail, as proof Harry knew about unlawful activity years ago, Harry calmly explained it was a flippant remark, and the attempted gotcha collapsed like a cheap tent. The most devastating moment came during re-examination by his own barrister, David Sherborne, when Harry described how ANL's behaviour had got worse, not better, since he first sued in 2019, and how the Mail had made Meghan's life an absolute misery, his voice cracking on that final word as the weight of years of coordinated harassment visibly hit him. Harry's court appearance. Prince Harry testified against Associated Newspapers Limited, ANL, in a highly anticipated trial, and let me tell you, it did not go the way the tabloids expected. His testimony lasted only 2 hours instead of the expected full day or more, and ANL's cross-examination strategy appeared to backfire significantly. ANL's lawyer, Anthony White KC, tried to paint Harry as chummy with royal reporters like Katie Nicholl and Rebecca English, suggesting they were part of his social circle, and that he'd obtained information through legitimate, friendly sources. Harry wasn't having it. He made it crystal clear that these reporters were work acquaintances at best, people he tolerated because of his position, not friends he confided in. When White tried to suggest Harry had a good relationship with Becky English, Harry openly scoffed. He demolished the notion that he hung out with Katie Nicholl, explaining she was merely a groupie who showed up at parties his actual friends attended. The whole "we're besties with Harry" defence crumbled spectacularly, and White wrapped up questioning early because it was becoming increasingly obvious that continuing would only damage ANL's case further. Harry walked out of that courtroom with his head held high, having made it abundantly clear to these delusional reporters, you were never his friends, you were his stalkers. ANL's weak defence strategy. The defence strategy from ANL was, to put it mildly, an absolute dumpster fire. Their lawyers leaned heavily into this bizarre narrative that Harry was basically besties with royal reporters, that he was texting Rebecca English between polo matches and doing brunch with Katie Nicholl, like they were in the same friend group. ANL's barrister kept trying to suggest that Harry had legitimate friendly relationships with these journalists, as if that would somehow explain away all the unlawful information gathering. Like, oh, Harry must have just been chatting away about his flight details and private medical information over cocktails with Rebecca English. Except, whoops, Harry shut that down immediately. He made it crystal clear that he was never friends with any of these people. They were work acquaintances at best, and more accurately, professional stalkers he had to tolerate because of his position. The Katie Nicholl angle was particularly pathetic. A&L tried to paint her as part of Harry's social circle, when in reality she was just a groupie who showed up at events where Harry and his actual friends were. Harry's response was chef's kiss. If Ms. Nichols' contacts were so good, why did she have to rely on unlawful information gathering? Exactly. The whole defence crumbled like a stale scone under the slightest scrutiny, which is probably why they rushed Harry off the stand after just 2 hours instead of the full day they'd planned. They realised they were only making their case look weaker with every question. Harry's emotional impact. Harry became visibly emotional when discussing the toll on Meghan, his voice cracking as he described how Associated Newspapers' conduct had made his wife's life an absolute misery. The word misery seemed to catch in his throat, and he lowered his head for a moment before his lawyer David Sherborne mercifully ended the questioning. It was the emotional climax of what had been a roller-coaster day in the witness box. And honestly, his composure and authenticity throughout the proceedings resonated strongly with courtroom observers, who noted that even in that vulnerable moment, Harry maintained his dignity. This wasn't some performative breakdown. This was a man who has watched the woman he loves be systematically tortured by a tabloid with an axe to grind, and he was done pretending it didn't hurt. The fact that he could stand there and articulate exactly what A&L has put his family through while maintaining his poise and fighting back against their lies speaks volumes about his character. His mother would be so proud of him. Key allegations against the Mail. The core of Harry's lawsuit centres on serious accusations that Associated Newspapers Limited crossed ethical and legal lines in their pursuit of stories about him and those in his orbit. A&L allegedly engaged in systematic unlawful information gathering, not just casual snooping, but coordinated efforts involving paid sources, invasive surveillance tactics, and the kind of information-obtaining methods that would make any normal person's skin crawl. We're talking about bugging phones, bribing airport staff for flight details and seat numbers, obtaining private medical records, and deploying investigators to track movements and relationships. But here's where it gets really insidious. Harry's legal team has presented evidence that after he filed his initial lawsuit against A&L in 2019, the Mail didn't back off or reflect on their practices. Instead, they went absolutely feral. The coverage became more vicious, more relentless, more degrading. It's textbook retaliation, a calculated campaign designed to punish Harry for daring to challenge them and to send a chilling message to anyone else who might consider holding the tabloid accountable. The intensity of the negative coverage ramped up precisely when Harry started fighting back, which tells you everything you need to know about their motives. This wasn't journalism, it was revenge. Harry's credible witness performance legal experts noted Harry was intelligent, articulate, and genuinely credible on the stand, so much so that A&L's barrister got him off that witness box as fast as humanly possible. A media lawyer pointed out in a video analysis that Harry's composure and clarity were damaging A&L's case with every answer, which is exactly why they cut what was supposed to be a full day of cross-examination down to a measly 2 hours. Harry effectively corrected the false narratives A&L's lawyer tried to peddle. The ridiculous assertions that he was besties with Becky English and Katie Nicholl, the insinuation that he hung out with Charlotte Griffiths in Ibiza, when Harry made it clear the first time he went to Ibiza was with Meghan and Archie. Thank you very much. His composed responses demonstrated the shocking weakness of the defence's arguments. They had nothing. They thought they could rattle him with their gotcha questions about royal reporters being his friends, and instead Harry calmly demolished that fiction. The defence couldn't wait to get him off the stand because he was too good, too credible, too unshakable. Harry showed up, told the truth with his whole chest, and walked out of that courtroom with his freedom strut intact, while A&L's lawyers scrambled to figure out how they're going to fill the remaining weeks of this trial. The journalists' delusional relationships. The most pathetic part of A&L's cross-examination was watching their lawyer try to convince the court that Harry was actual friends with royal reporters like Katie Nicholl and Rebecca English. Like, these journalists truly deluded themselves into thinking that polite small talk at events meant they were part of Harry's inner circle. Katie Nicholl literally stalked Harry. She's admitted to hanging around outside clubs and parties where he was, freezing in the cold, hoping for a glimpse of him. And because Harry once politely acknowledged her existence by saying, "You're freezing," she apparently spun that into a whole friendship narrative in her head. Harry made it crystal clear in court. These were work acquaintances at best, people he had to tolerate because of his position, not friends. He basically said, "Look, if Katie's sources among my friends were so reliable, why did she need to rely on phone hacking and unlawful information gathering?" Boom! The A&L lawyer tried to present emails and phone calls as proof of friendship, but Harry shut that down too. Those calls were made at KP's instruction, not because he wanted to chat with these people. The whole thing revealed how these royal reporters have created fantasy relationships with the royals in their minds, convinced that basic courtesy equals genuine connection. No wonder they reacted like jilted lovers when Harry left the UK and made it clear he'd never considered them friends. Evidence of unlawful tactics. The evidence trail is damning, and it's getting harder for A&L to hand-wave away the accusations of unlawful information gathering. Elton John's case centres on something particularly egregious. A&L somehow obtained his newborn son's birth certificate before Elton himself received it as the actual parent. How does that happen through legitimate journalism? Email chains, presented in court, show Daily Mail reporters literally offering money to airport staff in exchange for passenger information. Seat numbers, flight details, all of it. They weren't just passive observers waiting for tips from chatty friends. They were actively soliciting criminal behaviour from airline employees. And then there's the planted reporters. A&L would send journalists to events under false pretences, posing as friends or family members to gather information, then turn around and write articles claiming someone told the Daily Mail this or that, leaving the people who had those conversations utterly blindsided. It's not journalism, it's stalking with a byline, and the evidence is piling up in ways that make A&L's defence look increasingly desperate and thin. Trial implications and next steps. A&L's abbreviated cross-examination suggests they recognise the weakness of their case. They were supposed to question Harry for a full day, maybe 2, but they only managed about 2 hours before they basically gave up and got him off the stand. The trial was originally scheduled for 8 to 9 weeks, but may conclude much sooner, which honestly tells you everything you need to know about how weak A&L's defence really is. If they had any actual ammunition, they would have kept going, they would have stretched it out, they would have hammered away at Harry for hours. Instead, they saw how well he was doing on the stand, how he was combating their lies and refusing to let their sneaky little insinuations slide, and they panicked. Harry's strong testimony sets a positive precedent for other plaintiffs in the case. Liz Hurley is testifying now, and Elton John is up next. and they've all watched Harry show exactly how it's done. He walked in there with his shoulders back, he told the truth, he didn't let them twist his words or create false narratives about being besties with royal reporters, and he walked out with his head held high. The other plaintiffs now know that ANL's strategy is weak, that their lawyers will try to rely on lies and insinuations that crumble under scrutiny, and that standing firm and telling the truth is the way forward.